We are less than 10 days away from the 2024 NFL trade deadline, and we go over realistic and dream Baltimore Ravens trade targets, all that and more coming up next here on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. Are free and available for you all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form over on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to the channel. Also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe over there as well. We bring you 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. So be sure to keep it locked on here on Locked On Ravens for all the Baltimore Ravens coverage that you need. Today's bonus edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Happy Saturday. Hopefully everybody's enjoying their weekend so far. Here is a bonus episode again. And the headlines, not necessarily a ton of them from Friday, but we have the trade deadline coming up here for the NFL. It's kind of snuck up on us. Really, this entire fall is snuck up on me, to be honest. You know, it doesn't feel like we're about to hit November. It feels like we're still in September and football season just started, but we are almost halfway through the season. And with that comes the trade deadline. We're less than 10 days away now from that. The Ravens certainly in position, if they so choose to be, they can be buyers. And so we're going to talk about today, just so it doesn't slip away from me, because I'm sure we're going to have other stuff to talk about. But we're going to get into more trade talk throughout the rest of the weekend and, of course, next week and the week after that leading up to the deadline. It's just, who are some targets for this Ravens team, both realistic and dream targets. So in the first part of the show, we'll talk about the offensive side of the ball. We'll go over a couple of targets there. Second segment, we'll flip over to defense, talk about that. And then in the final part of the show, we'll just kind of have a conversation about how aggressive should Baltimore actually be here during the trade deadline. Do they need to make a move? Can they stand pat? And we'll kind of have those conversations throughout the show as well. So let's just get right into it, because this is honestly one of my favorite parts of the year. I'm big on, the trade deadline moves and all the frenzy. And look, it certainly already has been with the wide receiver market. You have Devontae Adams going to the Jets, Amari Cooper going to the Bills. You got DeAndre Hopkins going to the Chiefs. Some of those players we talked about as possible Ravens targets. But I think the player that a lot of people have become excited about is Cooper Kupp over in Los Angeles with the Rams. Obviously, after Thursday Night Football, we're going to essentially play a game here today on Locked On Ravens, where, realistic or dream. Realistic being, this is definitely a possibility the Ravens can make this move. Dream being, yeah, it'd be great, but probably not going to happen for whatever the reason. And for Cooper Kupp, that would definitely be a dream trade target for the Ravens. I don't anticipate that happening. I feel like if the Rams had lost on Thursday night, because now they're a 3-4 football team. If they were a 2-5 football team, it would have been a lot more realistic. A team would probably be able to get their hands on Cooper Kupp, and maybe that team would be the Ravens. But I don't think the Rams are going to deal him now. He'd be awesome in a Ravens uniform. I think when you're talking about offensive positionally for the Ravens, what position would they go after? You're not going after a quarterback. You're not going after a running back. Not going after a tight end. You're not going after offensive linemen. Really, it's wide receiver or bust on the offensive side of the ball. If the Ravens were to go and acquire a position, the only one you're really looking at is receiver. But Cooper Kupp, I'm out on that, just for the reason of I don't think it's happening. Like, I would love it if it did, but the Rams won on Thursday night. I think they're obviously, and Sean McVay kind of said as such, it's like, oh yeah, that's probably not going to happen for any team. So Ravens, not going to happen most likely. But then, hey, you know what? That also means the Pittsburgh Steelers, who were desperate for a wide receiver, Cooper Kupp, probably not going over there. We know they've definitely had their hand in a lot of trade conversations. A realistic / dream trade target for me, and this is someone, if you've been listening here on Locked On Ravens for a while now, if you've been listening to me talk about guys who the Ravens could possibly go after and they make a lot of sense for the Ravens, Courtland Sutton is a name that I think could be moved, but at the same time, I'm not sure Denver wants to move him, and that was certainly the apparently the conversations that were happening during the season before, was, Denver, they don't want to move Courtland Sutton. I think it's still possible they move him, but Denver also has been a better football team than I thought they were going to be this season. Their defense is lights out, but, they go and they blow out the Saints in prime time last week, and Courtland Sutton has no catches. And so it's like, okay, what's the plan for Courtland Sutton? Obviously, he's in their plans, but do they feel like it's more beneficial if they were to move him for, I don't know, a third-round pick, possibly? His contract is affordable over the next couple of seasons, so that's something for Baltimore. For that 1.5 plus, that's a big deal for them with their salary cap space. Baltimore's not going to have a ton of that to operate with. Courtland Sutton is a bigger-bodied player. He's someone that fits the Ravens' skill set. But here's the thing, and when I talk about receivers, possible acquisitions, possible guys to step into this offense, things are fluid here with this, and things change with this. And what I mean by that is you don't want a guy to come in here and necessarily take away from what Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman are doing this season. Where before the year, when we were talking about, could they move for Courtland Sutton? Is that something the Ravens would potentially do? We were talking about that, and this still is the case of it would be a 2A, 2B situation between Courtland Sutton and Rashad Bateman. Courtland has taken away snaps from Rashad Bateman. I think Rashad Bateman has done enough to really have a hold on that wide receiver 2 job. Like, I think he's done a great job, particularly over these last 3 weeks. So if you're Courtland Sutton, what does that look like in this Ravens offense? And we don't have to, the narrative of, if you're a wide receiver in the Ravens offense, you're only going to get 2 targets. No, we're done with that, right? We're done with that. But is Courtland Sutton worth it? 1, from the draft capital, 2, with the money, and 3, with the role to go out there and get? You have to ask that with all these receivers we've been talking about. I personally would do it. I think he would add something, but I just don't think Denver moves him. I don't think Denver moves him. So that's why I think that he could be a realistic option if Denver decides to say, okay, we're going to move forward with the other guys we have. I just don't expect them to do that. I expect Courtland Sutton to stay in Denver. So with that being said, who are some actually realistic targets for the Ravens? Well, obviously Mike Williams, his name has garnered a lot of attention over the last couple of weeks, especially with Aaron Rodgers calling him out. He'd be someone that I'd be more than on board with going and getting if I were the Ravens. Again, does he check all those boxes? His contract, it's not going to be something that puts you in a hole if you're Baltimore. His role, he's not going to challenge Rashad Bateman or Zay Flowers for snaps. You can kind of have him almost be in a timeshare with Nelson Aguilar, that number 3 spot at the very worst, if you need him to be. He's a bigger bodied player, jump ball player, not ask him to come in there and give you all of these, go out there, catch 10 passes for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. You don't need him to do all that. And he's not going to cost a lot. But here's the thing with the Ravens, when we're talking about everything that they have to factor in, this is a team that is currently projected for 11 draft picks this upcoming draft. So they don't have to be stingy with their picks if they don't want to. Now, obviously, they don't need to make a trade, just to do it. And we'll talk about that a little more as the show goes on. But in the receiver room right now, Deontay Hardy's on injured reserve, right? You have 2 sure things in Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. But what if one of those guys were to go down? What does your room look like at that point? I would love for them to get a depth player at wide receiver, someone that can play semi-consistent snaps. And then and again, knock on wood, Ravens, I'm not going to say it outright because I've gotten yelled at for saying something along those lines on the show before. But, if everything goes the way it's going, I'll just say that. Hopefully they don't need a guy to step in like that. But it's always good to have the insurance there. I know there have been a lot of rumblings around Carolina right now. They have a couple of wide receivers that could be of interest, Deontay Johnson being one of them. Deontay Johnson, I think, is probably not a guy the Ravens would want to go after. He's a heck of a player, but I just feel like he's not the type of guy that they want right now. I mean, I'd be cool with it if it happened, but I just don't. That's not something I foresee them doing. Adam Thielen's still on injured reserve right now, so if they want to go after a guy like Adam Thielen, I don't know what that would look like right now. But other than that, I mean, there aren't really a ton of other options I would go and look at for Baltimore from the wide receiver department. I just think it's a very specific type of role that they need. I think out of all of them, Mike Williams is probably the most realistic guy. I know Cooper Kupp sounds great. A guy like Courtland Sutton sounds great. I just don't think they make that type of move on offense because I think, look, the offense is doing so well right now and it's, historic pace, historic numbers. Yeah, it'd be great to add someone else just for insurance, just to kind of maybe the final infinity stone, which, again, could just be Keaton Mitchell in the long run. But I think a player like Mike Williams is probably the one that out of all the receivers I'm probably looking at right now. And if you have anybody, out there, if you're watching, listening, if you have a name that you feel like could be really beneficial for the Ravens, this is not the only time we're talking about the trade deadline here on the show over the next couple of days. Obviously, we're less than 10 days away. Put it in the YouTube comments if you're in video form, if you're in audio form. Be sure you can message me over on Twitter, Instagram. Go call your shot. I'd love to hear it because we can talk about those guys as well. Coming up with the second part of the show, we'll flip over defensive side of the ball, talk about some players that could be realistic options and guys that maybe are more dream targets for the Ravens. Stay tuned, a lot to get to on the show. First, the show is brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and millions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least two players for a shot up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on PrizePicks. PrizePicks has so many things they have to offer, and I love going on PrizePicks and seeing all of the things that they have up. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. So for the Ravens and Browns game coming up, maybe you like more on Lamar Jackson passing yards, more on Derrick Henry rushing yards. Those seems like pretty good things to look at over on PrizePicks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL. Get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. And this show is sponsored by Pre-Alcohol by Zbiotics. Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how to use it. Step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For best results, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. Step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use LockedOnNFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL. Check out for 15% off. We return our second segment here of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you on this bonus edition on Saturday. Again, hopefully everyone's weekend is going well. Crazy. We're already in week 8 of the 2024 NFL season. Ravens have turned their year around. Got to give them credit, right? Started off 0-2. Now they're 5-2. We give you 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage plus more. Obviously, like these bonus episodes, we have pregame episodes, game day episodes. We go live after every single Ravens game. So if you're in video form, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. We are almost to 9,000 subscribers on the video form side of things. Really, really appreciate the support. In audio form, our community continues to grow every single day. So really appreciate the support in audio form as well. If you have a friend or a family member who is a Ravens fan or just wants 5 days a week of daily Ravens coverage, be sure to send them over our way on Locked On Ravens. Now, we talked offensive potential realistic and dream trade targets for the Ravens with the deadline just under 10 days away. But let's flip over to the defensive side of the ball, which I know is the side of the ball that a lot of people want to see a move made at, especially with the way that the secondary has played, the way the pass rush has looked at times. So let's start on the front first. I think for pass rushers, there are a bunch of options that, one, could help the Ravens, and two, could be available and are very realistic. Now, for example, a player like Myles Garrett. I know the Browns are in a spot right now and that's the dreamiest of dream trade targets, all right? First of all, I don't think Cleveland's moving him. Second of all, they're not moving him to a division rival, right? I think it'd be awesome. It'd be great. Myles Garrett is a heck of a player, but it's not happening. Like, it's just not. I would love it, but it's not happening. Max Crosby has been a very popular name as well. Obviously, with Las Vegas kind of unsure of where they're heading, it feels like. They obviously move off of Devontae Adams. I think that's more realistic than Myles Garrett. I still think that is another dream trade target for the Ravens. I would love it if it happened. He would instantly become this team's best pass rusher by far and would boost that unit a ton. But I don't see that happening as well. I feel like more in the realm of realistic options for the Ravens would be, maybe just reuniting with somebody, right? I feel like a lot of names that are coming up right now, and even names that are being connected to the Ravens, are former Ravens. Za'Darius Smith over in Cleveland. He's a guy that could be an option. Jadeveon Clowney down in Carolina, right? That's a blast from the past, but not really, because he literally was like just here. He could be an option. Calais Campbell on the defensive line front, right? More of an inside guy, but is an interior pass rusher. Hey, I would love that if Calais were to come back. I think that'd be incredible if that were to happen. Then you also have the guys like, again, in Miami, Emmanuel Ogbah could be an option. Josh Uche down in New England could be somebody. There are different types of players that could be on the move in the pass rushing department. Now, I think the most realistic out of all of these is probably a guy like Jadeveon Clowney. If Carolina maybe eats some of that salary, that would obviously require Baltimore to give up a higher draft pick. But as we talked about, they don't have to be stingy with the draft capital this year because they have a lot of picks coming in. And I think with Jadeveon Clowney, it's been a struggle for him in Carolina this season. And we've been over this before, been over it many times. Guys who leave Baltimore sometimes don't have that same success with their new team. We see it with Geno Stone. We see it with Patrick Queen, obviously with Clowney, a couple of other guys as well. I think that Clowney could benefit from returning, but here's the thing with the pass rushers, particularly outside linebackers. Clowney classifies as a outside linebacker DN type, whereas Za'Darius Smith classifies more as a pure outside linebacker. If you want to go there, Emmanuel Ogbah is outside linebacker DN, but outside linebacker wise, and I'm counting that Yannick Ngakoue is listed on the Ravens roster as a DN, but I'm counting him as an outside linebacker. The Ravens right now have 6 outside linebackers on their roster. If they were to make a move for a 7th, that's too many. You would either have to move Adisa Isaac to IR, you have to just get rid of Ngakoue or somebody else. You would have to make a corresponding move there. But we see it with this pass rush where it's just too inconsistent. They're not getting enough pressure with 4 consistently. They haven't gotten a ton from David Ojabo this season. Odafe Owe has been hot and cold this year, right? I think that a guy like Kyle Van Noy is certainly he was incredible early in the season, but you can't rely on him as your only consistent option. Again, Owe is showing stuff here and there, but again, Isaac doesn't give you anything. And Ngakoue has given you flashes here and there. Ojabo is giving you a flash or two here and there. Like, it's not working. And so I think for the Ravens, adding a pass rusher is probably where I would go if I was acquiring somebody, if I were the Ravens. And again, that could be you give up a 5th round pick, a 6th round pick, a 7th round pick. You have to give up a 4th round pick, sure. But there are multiple different avenues for Baltimore to really bolster that pass rush. And I think that they're going to need it here down the stretch. Now, I know everybody's talking about the secondary. I know everybody's talking about it with how poor it's been, inconsistencies, miscommunications. We can go on and on and on and on about that. I know a lot of people are looking at Marshawn Lattimore as an option. Could he be traded? Could he be traded to the Ravens? Salary cap, what's that going to look like? Affordable, but I just feel like they're not going to make that move. It would be awesome I would love it if they made that move. But again, we're talking about realistic versus dream. And I think that would be more in the dream area for me. Because I think the Ravens, and I know that some people might not want to hear this, but this is what my opinion is on this. I would make a move personally, but I just don't know where that guy would play. So that's why I don't think the Ravens make a move there. Because I think they're going to try to ride it out with Marcus Williams. I think they probably move on from him after this year, but I think for this year, they're going to try to ride it out with him. Again, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins, Marlon, like all those guys. But here's the thing you have to keep in mind again. What if Marlon, his injury, he's doubtful to play this game against Cleveland, but if a guy goes down, you probably would need somebody else. So what does that look like? Because I know a lot of people for the safety market, for example, I know Budda Baker's name's been a name that's been thrown around a little bit. There are a couple of other guys kind of on the lower end of that. But I think if I'm looking at a defensive player, defensive position for the Ravens, I would look at a Zadarius Smith. I would look at a Jadeveon Clowney. I would look at a Calais Campbell. Those are the guys that I think I'd be looking at. Myles Garrett, Marshawn Lattimore, Max Crosby, all those guys, those are great. But I just don't think they're realistic for the Ravens this season. I would love it if they made that splash. And I'd be more than happy to say I was wrong on that because I want it to happen. Like maybe I'm setting up like the reverse jinx here, and I'll take all the credit when it happens if that is the case. But I still think that pass rush would be where I am going if we are talking about the Ravens and their trade possibilities here. Again, I don't think they need an inside linebacker. I don't think they need, a defensive end type outside linebacker. Yes, defensive end, like a bigger player like that. Really the only two guys I'd look at. Maybe there are three, but I think the two, it's getting Calais Campbell and Emmanuel Ogbah. But again, if you have a name, be sure to comment us down below on YouTube. You can message me over on Twitter, Instagram, and we can talk about those guys as well. If you're an audio listener, again, you can comment that as well. So a lot of it's fun and exciting to kind of go over all these possibilities. Because again, we were talking about, is DeAndre Hopkins an option for the Ravens? He goes to Kansas City. So it's a bunch of these chess matches. And okay, who's going to end up where? Kind of playing like the matchmaker game for these NFL teams. But coming up in the final part of the show, we'll talk about how aggressive Baltimore actually should be at the trade deadline here and what they actually need to do versus want to do. So be sure to stay tuned. We'll have to get you on the show. First, this show is brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So to get 100 in the game, you can check out the latest stats, play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You're started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. So for the Ravens and Browns game coming up here in Week 8, Ravens open up as 9.5-point favorites in that game. So if you like the road favorites in the Ravens, if you like the home underdogs in the Browns, be sure to pick your side over on FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com. That's FanDuel.com. We return our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this bonus edition of the show. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, making us your first listen of the day here on Locked On Ravens, and support of your day in general. We have a lot coming your way, and we have had a lot coming your way this entire season. It's been an awesome season here on Locked On Ravens, growing awesome communities, video form, audio form, social media, subtext, the whole 9 yards. So if you're an everyday, you listen and watch every day on this show, really appreciate all your support. If you're new to the channel, new to the show, welcome in. If you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back in. Now, there's a conversation around the trade deadline just about buyers and sellers and everything that goes on and like how aggressive teams should be. When it comes to how aggressive the Ravens should be, here is my overarching stance on kind of how I feel about this. The Ravens, I think that they need to seriously consider looking into improving this team. If there's one thing Eric DeCosta is good for, it is that. He is always looking around, always exhausting every option to try to improve his football team, even in ways that, maybe we might not even be thinking of here, right? We might be, we're so focused. Okay, wide receiver, pass rusher, secondary potentially. And then Eric DeCosta goes out and he acquires somebody else in a different position that we're not even thinking of. For example, nobody really expected the Ravens to acquire Marcus Peters when they did. They didn't need corner help, but Marcus was a really good part of that team for a couple of years. Roquan was a guy that people were saying, oh, well, they could do this, but maybe a wide receiver will be better. And they went and acquired Roquan, and it has worked out beautifully for the Ravens. So for this team, they need to look into the options, but they don't need to operate from a position of desperation. They don't need to operate from a position of, we need this. If the Ravens are talking, they're no, they don't need this. They don't need it. But I think it helps. It would help. But if they don't add anybody, if they decide to stand pat, not make anything happen, and just say, we're confident in our guys, if that's what their stance is and their mantra is, this team is good enough to win a Super Bowl with or without a trade. It is. It's a good enough team to win with or without a trade. And I think that while adding a guy probably improves those chances, not adding a guy is not going to end your season. Now, obviously, health plays a big role in this. Overall production plays a big role in this. Hitting your stride at the right time plays a big role in this. And having the right guys around your team plays a big role in this, among, again, millions of other factors. But you look at kind of those three positions of need that we hit on: wide receiver, pass rusher, and secondary. Just from a personnel perspective, sure, they could probably use another depth wide receiver. Right? I think it would benefit them. You have Zay and Rashad Bateman, and then, Nelson Aguilar here, Tyler Wallace there, Tez Walker, et cetera, et cetera. I'd certainly say that they could stand at a guy there. Pass rusher, they have a lot of depth, but, not a lot of their depth is actually producing on a consistent basis. It's Kyle Van Noy and it's, Dafeowe and, Ngakwe sometimes. But even for a guy like Yannick Ngakwe, it's like, okay, do you want to rely on that guy or do you want to go in and get somebody else? And in the secondary, Marcus Williams has not been great this season. Doesn't even seem like he knows what his role is. I mean, Cordell Woodland talked to him and he said that, his role changed at all. Marcus said, I don't know, I'm just doing what the team tells me to do. So he goes out there, does what the team tells him to do. That doesn't sound great to me. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I don't know what that looks like. That's why I feel like they probably move on from him after this season, but we'll have that conversation later. We'll see how this year plays out. But they don't need to make a trade just to make a trade, right? Don't throw away draft capital, especially when that Eric DeCosta, when it comes draft time, he is working those phones, trying to move up, trying to move down, trying to move in sideways. He's trying to move all different directions when it comes to his draft capital. So if you're just throwing a draft pick just to throw a draft pick for a guy that's not going to help the team, like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to make a trade to make a trade. The Ravens don't have to act from that position. And it's really good that they don't. Because, again, as long as you have Lamar, you have a shot. And the roster that has been built around Lamar, it's not a perfect roster. No roster is perfect. But it is definitely enough without a trade to go in a Super Bowl. So they should certainly be aggressive. They should certainly be looking at all the options. But they don't need to just make a trade to make a trade. That's my final verdict on that. And again, we'll talk about that as well as the week goes on, as we get closer and closer to the trade deadline. Again, November 5th is that trade deadline. So we have a lot to dive into leading up to that. That's all I have here today on this bonus edition of Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in on the way out. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and that subscribe button in audio form as well, and follow along there. Coming up tomorrow, we are going to have 6 a.m. our game day episode ahead of Ravens and Browns. So be sure to stay tuned for that. I'll see you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.